I'm Nathan Ponchard, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the new generation MG3. Now, the old MG3 lived for 13 years and was really only about price. It's actually still on sale and is $18,990 drive away. This is going to be nothing like that car. The only thing it shares with the old MG, as far as we know, is the name, although I suspect that the base petrol might also be the same, but at least it's no longer a 4-speed automatic. The car we have here is an MG3 Hybrid Plus, which means hybrid with stuff, because who knows what the plus means, and it's in the top spec Essence. It's Excite and Essence, and then there's the base car in Excite and Essence. We have no official pricing as we're filming this, although by the time you're watching this, hopefully we will have a number, but it's going to be about $5,000 dearer than the car that it replaces, so this is definitely lifting MG from being absolute bargain basement that you only buy for the price and the warranty, to something that's actually worth buying for the product. Does the new MG3 succeed as a car and worth the extra money? That's what we're here to find out.
Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by
If there was one thing the previous MG3 had going for it, it was the styling. Sure, the door handles look like they might break off in your hand with those old flip-up door handle things, but the rest of the shape of it, and particularly the front, and I think before the facelift, actually looks pretty smart. Here, we have a completely different car with a completely different look. Now, I don't know what you think about the look of the new MG3 at the front. I do like the lights. In this case, the Essence has these LED lights. We've got LED daytime running lights up the sides here. It's got some faux carbon fiber down here. Well, that's nice. But this section here in the center, below the front camera, which is pretty cool, is just, it looks a little bit like a Cheshire cat wincing. It's kind of uncomfortably wincy. That's my opinion. Let us know what you think in the comments. Anyway, this can be facelifted out later on because it's just the bumper bar. And if you can get over that, the rest of the look of the car is actually pretty good, I think. Now, all of the models have 16-inch alloys as standard. They've been criticized for being a bit under-tired by some other people, but I actually think they look kind of cool. They've just got Kumho Solus 195 55 16 tires. Nothing fancy, but you know, it does give the car a little bit of a nice look. This dark metallic grey Essence here, I think actually is the best looking one of the lot. It also has a sunroof, as we shall find out when we get in the car, which adds a little bit of pizzazz. In terms of the sizing of it, it has a 50mm longer wheelbase than before, so it's 25-70mm long. That's 20mm longer than a Yaris, and almost as long as what medium sedans were in the 80s. So we're starting to get into pretty decent room in what is essentially a light slash super mini car here. It's almost 1800mm wide too, 1797. So that's quite a bit of width for a car this small, and 1500mm tall. So there's a surprising amount of metal here for the money in the new MG3. Engineering wise, there is 2 drivetrains, although we only have access to one at the moment. The base car will have a 1.5 litre naturally aspirated 4-cylinder with a CVT front wheel drive. This one here is the hybrid. It also has a 1.5 litre naturally aspirated 4-cylinder, but it has an Atkinson cycle to make it more efficient. It's also combined with a 100 kilowatt electric motor and a 1.83 kilowatt hour battery. So, and actually a 3-speed automatic, which sounds like 1985, but it all kind of works together, as we shall find when we drive the car. Pointing out some of the sophistication of the MG3 too, which includes that drivetrain I just mentioned, is that while it just has struts up the front and a torsion beam at the back, it actually has 4-wheel disc brakes, which is extremely unusual for a Super Mini. They usually still have drums. So the MG3 is definitely lifting itself in terms of where it's positioned in the market. Inside the boot here, 293 litres according to MG, which is actually pretty good for this class of car. We're sort of in the light class, sub B in Europe. Underneath the floor here, we've sort of just got polystyrene with a tyre pressure kit, the actual regular battery there, and then this sort of section here where you can put something that you don't want anyone to look at. We've also got a hazard thing that sort of velcros into the floor. But one of the areas I think that the MG3 really falls down is that the back seat is not split. So we had 1980s hatches, maybe even 70s hatches that had split rear seats, and this is just a single fold, And to get it from here, you've got to pull the parcel shelf down and reach through, or go inside and unclip both sides at the same time for the thing to fall flat. And then when it does go flat, but not flat with the rear floor, it leaves a big section open here between where the seat and the rear floor is for just stuff to slide down, fall away, hide under the back cushion. It's really amateur. It's just one major flaw, I think, in the car that completely ruins the utility of what is otherwise a really good small hatch. Inside the MG3, which is where you're going to spend most of your time, it definitely has some positives and negatives, but let's start with the design first. I think inheriting the two-spoke steering wheel from the MG4 is a great idea because it's a brilliant steering wheel, both to look at and to hold, even though the switchgear on the steering wheel isn't marked properly and you need to know what does what and how to do things to get it all to work smoothly, although the cruise control is more marked than it is in the MG4, so MG is definitely learning. The style of the dashboard and just the arrangement and layout is also really functional. We don't have the MG4's controller sitting up here on a beak and getting in the way of the cup holders. It's all been lowered down and it's nice and easy. This works really quickly, putting it into gear and reverse and all that stuff. Electronic park brake, the drive mode's just here. It's simple. Cup holders in front, a little rubberized tray here. In fact, it looks like it's rubberized, but it's not. It's just smooth, so your phone will bang around. We've got a USB-A for the wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, USB-C for charging there. All of this looks pretty good. Oh, I should also mention, this camping bottle effortlessly fits in the front door of this very small hatchback. So there's SUVs that can't do that. So just in terms of basic functionality, I think it's actually really good. The screens are also a significant step forward. This 7-inch driver display, same as in the MG4, but it has had a few tweaks to what you see here. When we're driving it, it actually has an energy flow mode that even has a tiny, tiny little tachometer in the middle of the car image. I think it's the only hybrid I can think of that actually has a tacho. So when the 3-speed automatic and the engine are working, you can actually see it in a very small, about the size of your finger, smallest fingernail, just sitting there. But it is useful. I find it quite informative. And this 10.25-inch screen here, again, essentially the same as the MG4's, but it has different fonts, better fonts, more colorful, quicker processing speed. Everything is generally pretty easy to access, although say something like when you have Apple CarPlay on and you need to change the ventilation, you can't just hit the ventilation tab here. You need to go to home and then you need to go to climate to be able to do it. You can't just go directly through smartphone mirroring. So there is a couple of little quirks about it, but it has definitely improved a lot. Where the things start to get let down a bit, I think, is stuff like the steering wheel only adjusts for tilt. It only goes up and down. And somehow, this driving position works really good for me. The steering's in the right place. The seat is great. This Essence here has cloth in the middle, perforated vinyl on the outside. We add things like the orange stitching on the paddings on the doors here, a bit of orange stitching with vinyl on the dash here, and the orange stitching around the sides of the seats in the Essence that the Excite doesn't have. That adds a little bit of difference. The previous MG3 had sort of plaid cloth to sort of have a bit of a tartan nod to being the brand being originally English or Scottish maybe, and that is now in the dash insert here, and I think that's really cool. It runs around the other side of the touchscreen in the center here, and again, that's quite different. All of the ventilation, the piano black around it, the little touches of sort of matte aluminium, even in the doors here, all adds a little bit of expense. So we've got a new column stalk on the left here that has the lights, that doesn't have the little flick up and down thing that the MG4 had that was really clumsy and not functional. So MG is listening and they're constantly improving. Where you can feel that this car is cheap is that all the plastics are absolutely rock hard. There is nothing in here that is soft touch other than maybe a little bit of the vinyl on the side here. The rest of it is all sort of fairly rudimentary, but it's all consistent and it seems to be pretty well put together, and I like that. Even things like here in the armrest here, we've got a little tray here. You can sit your phone, I suppose, because there's no wireless charging. And this moves back here, which opens this little section here. We've got a cup holder here. The keys are here right now. You can move these little sections out and have it a bit wider or a bit narrower. This can just come here and come out altogether, so it leaves you a fully open tray. So there's a degree of utility in what is really a small and relatively inexpensive car. One of the things though that I was really surprised about was the sunroof. Now, in a small car, a sunroof is usually just a waste of time because they're so small, but I'm sitting here and I'm not tall. I'm 5'10", 177 centimeters, something like that. And the sunroof is here. So when it's open, I can actually see outside and get a sense of airiness in the MG. So it actually makes spending the extra money on the Essence worthwhile just for something like that. Being in the Essence spec, we do have a few extras over the base car. We have these map pockets in the backs of the front seats. We have a rear reading light, which I think is this courtesy light here. We can see all the orange stitching, same trim as in the front, that sort of stuff. Little things in the MG3 that are a surprise are stuff like these rear air vents, not usual in a small car like this. We have one USB-A port. We have a very tiny tray underneath here. Sitting here behind myself, this seat is in its lowest position because it has height adjustment. The front passenger does not have that, so the difference in the height between the seats is about that. So this will have tons of room. This has quite a bit of toe room, but there is something under the seat that my toes are touching. So when I'm in there, you could call it a footrest, but I think it's completely incidental. This room though, and this toe room here, foot room, is actually pretty good. The seat itself, the base, the support of the under thigh is pretty good, but the backrest is a little bit weird. It's like, almost like it's convex, like you're kind of rolling around on something. And when I sat in the middle before, I think that the middle part of the backrest is actually cushier than what's on the outside here, which is kind of unusual. There is a small floor hump, but not much. But the back of the console here does intrude on your legs a little bit. The doors won't take a camping bottle. It's more just like a 600ml bottle. The doors, there isn't really anything to grab hold of. You do have a kind of a padded armrest here, but it's really not much. There is overhead grab handles here, which is a relief because that's not always in cars like this, although they aren't damped, as you can tell. So good in most parts, but slightly odd in others. If I could think of two words to describe the previous generation MG3, it would be loud and crude. And neither of those apply to the new generation MG3. It is a surprisingly polished drive, at least this Hybrid Plus version, because it does things way beyond expectation. Starting with the stuff that I've been really impressed by is the suspension tune. Like, I really had no expectation at all. I didn't think it was going to be great, although the MG4, I've had a long-termer for 5 months and I've been running this car and I have really bonded with that quite well. What I will say up front though is if anyone says the MG3 drives just like an MG4, they aren't doing their job properly because it's completely different. It's nothing like the MG4. But on its own, what this car does is really good. The MG4 does not ride well, whereas the MG3 is composed and controlled. It really handles big bumps quite well. It has a flow to it. You can hammer this car along a bumpy Australian country road and it just eats it up. It rocks the body around a little bit. It does have a little bit of, I suppose, I wouldn't call it jitteriness, but it does have a little bit of graininess to the suspension, but then MG recommends 37 PSI in the tyres, so that's quite a lot. So we're dealing with that as well, and really it's not an issue. Around town, again, pretty good, not super quiet, but generally comfortable and cushy and flows well, and it also translates that into the handling. What lets the MG3 down a bit is the steering. It has the MG4 steering wheel, but it does not have that EV steering. It is not light, it is not quick. It is heavy, it is a bit springy in corners where certainly if it's fighting against bumps and stuff in the road, it starts to make your thumbs ache in the steering wheel because it kind of loads up, even in normal mode. Sport mode is great for really, really tight stuff, but it really is quite firm. Otherwise, that's just undrivable. Just leave it in normal or eco and it's fine. But yeah, around center, it's a little bit sticky. It's just a little bit too weighty and it's like fighting you a little bit the more that you drive it to sort of go back to straight ahead. It is not light nor crisp. And those two things I think would probably really benefit the car. to drive it quickly through corners. If you just drive delicately on the steering, it sort of doesn't really seem like it wants to go in a corner. But if you throw it in and really chuck the steering in a bit, then the car settles onto its back axle, and it's really quite a fun handling car. I never thought an MG3 would be fun, but it is. It has moments of a little bit of understeer here and there, but again, I think that relates to the steering and its kind of inconsistency of its response. It's the chassis itself is really good. There's even a bit of adjustment from the back end and not too much intrusion from the ESC. That does intrude a little bit in terms of the drivetrain, because this hybrid here has a 0 to 100 claim of 8 seconds. That is quick for any car this size. That's like warm to hot hatch quick. MG also says the 80 to 120 rolling acceleration is 5 seconds. Again, that is quick. So the combination of the electric motor and the 1.5 litre petrol 4-cylinder and having a 1.83 kilowatt hour battery, all of that together really gives it quite a bit of punch. For the most part, it drives around electrically. Like, you can feel the EV mode. I put my foot down here. It sort of initially goes straight on the battery and then it brings the engine in. There is a bit of lag there once it builds the engine up. It doesn't seamlessly flow through that stuff. And so you wouldn't call it turbo lag, but it is definitely drivetrain lag. But for the most part, it's quick. It really is quite quick. And around town, it's pretty drivable. There is 3 regenerative braking modes, which is unusual for just a regular series parallel hybrid like this. It defaults to the mid setting, and that's where you should leave it. The heavy setting, I like that in an EV, but here it's a little bit sticky. It's sort of like kind of emus and does this in the car, like forward and back, forward and back, forward and back. Like, it's not as smooth as it should be. Best off to lessen the effect of that and let it do its own thing and let it recharge the battery. Watching the accumulated total here and the energy flow combined with a 3-speed automatic, which I know sounds super weird, but given that it runs on the EV much of the time, like, the gears, and they're really tall, don't seem to make a whole lot of difference. Like, doing well over 100 k's an hour, it's only doing 2,500 revs, 2,700 revs, winding it right out. It doesn't go much over 5,000, and it doesn't always use the engine. It's got other bits and pieces sort of working with it. It's a very unusual experience, but also a really quite effective one. Across 215 kilometres, we've averaged 5.2 litres per 100 kilometres. The claim combined is 4.3, and 5.2 is really good. I was not deliberately driving this for economy. This morning, driving out to the photo location, I drove it through the city and hammered it, and it averaged 5.5. So, and I must say that it does drink 95 octane premium unleaded, and it also only has a 36 litre tank, because the hybrid tank is smaller than the normal petrols. But if you go from the combined number, that's 837 kilometres from a tank, or from our average, it's still over 650. So for a city car, it's not only quick, it's not only likeable, but it's also really drivable. And the steering is better around town than it is when it's out on country roads and stuff. And again, you do get used to it, and you can drive around it and really have quite a bit of fun in the MG3. Other than that, the things that I like is just the vision. The cow's quite low. The refinement of the car is pretty good. Like I said, the driving position, given that there's almost no adjustment, is surprisingly good. There's windows, all of them are one touch down. Only the driver gets one touch back up, but all of them are one touch down, which is also a surprise. The stereo is surprisingly good. MG's warranty is 7 years, all of that sort of stuff. There's so much more to like about the MG3 than I thought there was going to be, and it actually has a unique character about it. No other hybrid really drives like this, and yet Australia doesn't have access to a hybrid in this category other than the Yaris, and it's not a quick car. The MG3 is really quite quick. I'd say at least 3 seconds faster to 100 than a Yaris hybrid. So maybe it should have 18-inch wheels and a spoiler, but whatever. It is what it is, and what it is actually really, really impressive. About the only thing I'd really criticise about the driving, other than what I've said about the steering, is some of the safety stuff. It is really easy to switch off, as we pointed out on the screen here, but the way that it does lane keep assist, it just saws away at the wheel. It just really just snatches around it. You can drive it around in the city, and for the most part it doesn't even notice the lane markings, but when it does, it doesn't do it with any kind of subtlety. There is still quite a bit of room for improvement there. As I film this, without knowing the official price of the MG3 Hybrid Plus Essence, how do you actually assess the car properly? It's meant to be $5,000 more than the outgoing car, meaning it's going to start at around $25,000 drive away. But is that for the regular engine, or is that for the hybrid? I'm guessing it's the regular one. And so if you think, say, 3 or 4 grand on top of that for the hybrid, sort of 28, 29,000 drive away, admittedly, the Toyota Yaris hybrid starts at 28,000 not drive away, and it's a Toyota. So the MG3 has moved itself well into the genuine category of small light hatches, rather than being in a subcategory where it's priced against the Kia Picanto, which is much smaller. So I think it can carry a large amount of that price increase because it is actually a really good car. It's fun to drive, it's comfortable, it rides really well. The driving position and the seats are great. It has plenty of equipment. The multimedia is massively improved. The safety stuff's all there and actually easy to switch off and not too hateful. It's just little things like that sort of back seat fold that lets it down. Some of the safety action of some of the safety stuff, which you can turn off, I suppose. The steering is not great. It is not an MG4, but it's an MG3 that is actually likable and livable and worth spending more money on. So as it stands right now, I do really like this car. I don't like the look of the front, but I do really like it as a car, and I can understand why someone would want to live with this day in, day out, and actually really quite like it, perhaps even love it. If you haven't subscribed, please do so below the video. Hit the notification bell and tell us what you think of the new generation MG3, the hybrid engine, its price increase, whatever, or about chasing cars. Thanks for watching.